Best. Howdy, howdy. Is this thing on? Testing, 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 test. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Sorry for the minute lateness on the link. Zoom did some updates and now I can't find a dang thing, man. Clearly unacceptable on my part. Sorry. So hopefully I don't have any more technical issues. If I do, I will figure it out, but I'll do my best. The weekend was actually pretty good. Uh, is it rained all weekend, so today was a nice break from the rain, and just been chilling, enjoying the nice weather, hanging out with my kids. How about you, Liam? I hope everybody's weekend was also well. All right, so this is the Sunday night market review, where I just take a look at the Magnificent Seven stocks, probably a few other of the heavy hitters, and we'll talk about some earnings, and then that's probably going to be about it. I don't want to inundate people too much. We just had a nice jobs report, which basically said people are losing their jobs, and the market responded with a big thumbs up on that. And some people are a little confused on that. Like, people are losing their jobs. How is that a good thing? Well, one, the market is not a reflection of the economy. It's not a reflection of how people are doing at home. It's a reflection of how rich people are getting richer, essentially. So if the market's doing well, that doesn't necessarily mean that the economy is doing well. Two, the markets are always forward looking, and they're starting to price in that the Fed is going to end up being forced to cut rates, and sooner rather than they have anticipated. I think Powell said that they didn't plan on cutting rates at all this year, maybe once or twice or once. Not sure exactly. I didn't listen to Papa Powell drone on, but uh, so the markets are anticipating essentially that the Fed is going to have to end up cutting rates sooner than they're telling people. So that's what we're pricing in right now, in my opinion. That's what's happening with that. That's why the job loss, the uptick in unemployment was good for the markets, because they think that it'll get them to where they want to be, and they could be right. So the markets want the Fed to cut rates because it stimulate, and they're going to run it up. And then once the Fed cuts rates, they're probably going to sell the market. So keep an eye out for that. Hello, Norberto. Do we? Do I think we can expect a run up on Palantir this week? Absolutely. I think we're going to see a run up on that this week, and then uh, in anticipation for earnings, and then we'll see what news they want to drop. So the question: market rate cuts equal market sell off? Not necessarily a sell off, but definitely a pullback. Historically, once the Fed pivots during times of high inflation, uh, the market reacts with a pullback. It runs up, and then we get the cut, and then they pull back. So historically, yes, when the Fed cuts rates, the market pulls back. Right. My only other thing right now is that Warren Buffett's sitting on like $200 billion. He's not buying right now, and I think people need to realize that. Um, so that's telling me that we might have room for some more downside in the near term, because he sits on a pile of cash until a pullback happens, and then he buys everything he wants to buy. So he's got this big pile of cash. He might be expecting a pullback. We don't know. So something to keep an eye on. Okay, so him personally, he probably does have a pile of cash, yes, but Berkshire Hathaway has $200 million in cash that they are not spending right now, and people should take note of that. All right, so let's take a look at Amazon. 4 weeks ago, we hit new all-time highs here, pulled back into the gap, pushed back up. I still think Amazon wants that 200, maybe this week, maybe next week. For those who are new, I am not a financial advisor. Trade at your own risk. Trading is risky. Yada yada yada. I start from a week a top down approach. So I start at a weekly chart and I work my way down to the daily and then the 4 hour. And if I see any trade setups that I like, I'll mark them down on my chart, and I will point out anything that I feel I would like to point out to people as well. So, and then this recording will be available probably in the morning. So Amazon hit that all-time high, pulled back into the gap, big hammer, big run up there. I'm liking the attack to 200, and I think that's exactly what we're going to end up going here. Big run up, even with the higher volume, the sell volume is still running up. I think it's going to go. So change in market structure, the pullback here again, and then the rip. Makes sense to me. Apple putting on almost 6% on Friday. It was beautiful move. A lot of people made a lot of money there. The thing with Apple is I think it's a dip buy. People are buying this dip, and that's where I was going to go short. And then the buyer stepped in last week and ran it up. I think we're going to try for 200 again on Apple. And we'll see if it happens there. But right now we're ranged. We got to the bottom of this range. And last week I said we're either going to dump to the bottom of that range and push down into this cap, or we're going to bounce. And I was trading the break to the downside. I was wrong. We're going to bounce back up to the top of this range, it looks like. So I think it wants to try 200 again, and we'll see what happens when it gets there. But that's a big move on a weekly chart. There's a huge move on a daily chart. So keep an eye on Apple. I think we might want to pull back a little bit and then continue. So it might look something like this. That's what I'd be anticipating for Apple. Google getting that pullback, getting the push back up. I think we're going to probably see some continuation here on the Googles. Watching last week's high, very nice inside week. You can delete that line. I'll watch last week's high and last week's low. I'm just going to go ahead and mark them off on my chart. And then I'm going to be looking for a move to the previous week's high and then the previous week's low. But we do have a pretty high area of support here. That was that last high right there. So I'm actually, here's a fun trick. I'm going to take 50% of this candle right here. And I'm just going to use a fib retrace, and then I have a setting for the 50% mark. So last week we hit 50% of the previous week, and then we bounced. So that's feeling bullish to me. So I'd be looking for a long trade coming off of Google here. If it breaks to the downside, it might get a flush into 150. So that might be a nice little swing. Looking at it on a daily chart, this is what the trade setup would look like. Look for that move above the previous week's high up to 174.71. And then I would set my stop, probably looking at the 4 hour here. Set my stop according to wherever it looks good here. Got the move here, a little bit of a order block issue. That looks like a decent move. So a 2-to-1 trade. If it breaks that, you can always shore up. Or I can always shore up the stop as it goes too. Or I could just day trade weekly contracts on a push. What would that look like here? Breaking it down a little bit further. Friday's pre-market high. Would actually be, see if we can push above that. That would increase my risk to reward a bit. And then look for a push into 174. That's what I'm looking at there. Breakout and a push. On the NVIDIAs, I think we're going to 1,000. I think we're pushing. We took out all these highs. We're holding up here. I think it's going to push. I mean, like, it might get a little pullback in here to like 880, 875 before it's got a little reload a little bit there before pushing in, or it could just, take off. But it's a nice little, I assume there's going to be a triangle there on the 5 minute. Bouncing off that EMA, holding its own. I'd be looking for NVIDIA at 1,000 this week, maybe. I think in the next 2 weeks. Definitely NVIDIA to 1,000. AMD, since it's here, I assume is going up as well. I was really looking for it to push down into 116. And now last week we took out the highs and the lows of the previous week. So it took out all the stops here and all the stops here. And it's going to be looking to make a move. Let's take a look at the daily. Nothing really much I can see on the daily other than that we're in a gap. So I honestly don't think we're going to get. Here's what I think. So a lot of people trade AMD because it's the cheaper NVIDIA as far as price is concerned. But I think that is an incorrect way to look at NVIDIA or AMD, because AMD also makes CPUs and other things. Their exposure to the AI market is not as robust as NVIDIA. So people sometimes look at AMD thinking that they can trade AMD the same way they would trade NVIDIA. And the chart right now is saying no. It's saying that I still think AMD wants 116. I still think it's going to come down. We'll see if I'm wrong or not. But I think we're going to see the pullback in AMD and then money run into NVIDIA. Meta broke to the downside of that range and is now retesting. So we had this range, came to the upside, we ranged again. Then we came back to the downside, gapped all the way down below it, got the buy up, and now we're right at the bottom of this range right here. This would be previous support becoming resistance. I would look for a short and adjust my stop accordingly. Start for these lows, and then maybe a possible gap fill. But as you can see, price is bouncing. It's coming back up, but the volume is just dying off completely. So I'd be looking bearish right now on Meta, even though long term I am bullish on Meta. Microsoft back up into the range. I think it's probably going to try 420 and then continue ranging here. It took out the top side, came back down, took out the bottom side. Now we're back in the range. So it's two failed breakouts to each side. I think it's probably just going to come back up to 420, 422, and, come back and just continue bouncing around. So I'd be looking long from 407 to 420 on Microsoft this week. Tesla with the big gap up and then the pullback bouncing right off that line, which was beautiful, and then coming back up and breaking to the upside. I think it might want to make 190 this week, maybe 200 this week. We'll see. But we'll see if the bulls are going to stay motivated here. We've got volume dying off, sell volume dying off, 4 red days in a row there on Tesla. I think it does want to make that push up. I think bears are going to start losing interest here. That's not to say that they won't, come next week. I'd be watching this 175.86 area for a break to the downside of there for a bearish move back into the wedge. So that's my take on Tesla. Let's take a look at some of the other larger stocks here. Flip over to my main stock. Disney, I know, has been hitting people's scanners and interest as well. Got that big push up. Now we're at the bottom of the range and we're coming back up. We're holding that price target we hit on the weekly a few weeks back. So you got that price target, got the measuring gap, the exhaustion, price target, and now we're bouncing off that price target that we hit. Got a lot of action over here, giving us some nice support to push it back up. Let's take a look at the 4-hour. Did get the break over that trend line. I don't have it on here, but that's what I saw. The break over that trend line, channeling down, breaking to the upside after holding that price target. Feels like it wants to push up again. I would look at, let's see, I'm just looking around. Probably that 115 mark at the very least this week. And going into next week. Maybe 118 into next week. So I think we're going to get a price reversal back up to the top of this range on Disney. Boeing, I think, is going to have some issues. It did get down here to the point where I wanted to long, bounce right off this gap, and now it's putting in a long. I think it might want to come up here and try this monthly gap again before coming back down. They've got their own issues. Boeing does, but this was a hot spot where I wanted to be watching for a long, and that's exactly where it got the long. Got the nice move, the push back up. Not enough volume really on the weekly though. Big move to the upside. Took out the previous week's high, but on less volume. So slightly concerned about that big push up. I think it might be feeling a bit weak. We'll see if the bulls step in this week. Palantir's got earnings, or Palantir. It's got earnings. Looking for the long. We got the bounce off that order block, I think, which was from the 4-hour, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere in here, there's an order block that we had, that I had on the chart. I'm going to say weekly then. Yep, it was this candle, the last up candle before the downtrend was the order block I was watching. Got the long, got the push up. I think it's going to push up into probably around 26. Did get actually the breakdown of the head and shoulders, the push down into the order block, and now the push back out. So I think it's going to make a run at 26, come out here and try and take out the highs of this right shoulder here. And then we'll see where we are for earnings. Let's see if investors think they're still worth it. But I think we get a run up this week. And options flow would also suggest we're going to get a run up. And the indexes. SPY up to the upside of this 4-hour channel, taking out the highs. I think it's going to want to push into 516. We'll see if it wants to break out of this channel or if it's going to push in and reject and then fall back into like the 512, 513 area. But looking for a push up into what is that line? 515. I'd be looking for a push up into 515. Qs, I assume, are going to follow the same, although I have a short labeled out here. It did not respect the 618 line, the 618 fib retrace here. Again, it respected it here, pulled back. It did not respect it again. I think it's going to continue up. So I think we are pushing back into this range. I think we're going to push back up. I think tech's probably going to lead the way here. Diamonds getting the bounce off of that. Oops. Oh my goodness. Hold on. I need a drink of water. Hydration break. Bouncing off that exhaustion gap for a third time and pushing up. I think the diamonds are going to want at least 392. Come back up here to this line again and see if we can't make a breakout. When I'm looking at options flow for the upcoming week, what am I primarily looking for? I'm looking for volume over open interest being the contracts that are still available that need to be closed, the contracts that are open. And I'm looking for volume that's coming in more than the contracts that are currently available. Volume under the amount of open interest would suggest possible closing of transactions or closing of contracts. So I'm looking for more volume over the open interest, and I'm looking for like large blocks of orders for a decent amount of premium. And that's a relative term because a decent amount of premium on something like Palantir is not going to be a decent amount of premium on something like Apple. You know what I'm saying? So it's relative. And that comes with watching the flow and getting familiar with how it works. But more volume than there is open interest and money coming in and out the money contracts. So the diamonds, I think, are going to make a push up here. And then IWM. I mean, they're trying. Bless their souls, they're trying. Small caps just won't let it go. I think we're gonna get the rejection, and I think we're gonna get the continuation back to the downside for small caps. I don't think if there is financial trouble coming, I don't think it's time for small caps yet. I think this is hope. I think this break above 205 is hope. And I don't foresee it happening. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope a lot of those small caps make a lot of money for people. But I think it rolls over and dies into the 160s. All right. And take a quick look at banks. Goldman Sachs hitting new all-time highs. So keep that in mind because that should give us some nice trade here on Morgan Stanley. See how, where did it go? Where'd you go? Fine. Goldman pushing above, hitting new highs. Morgan, not quite there. I think a nice move over probably 94 and a half. We'll get a nice move up into over 100. So I'd be looking at along here as Morgan tries to catch up to Goldman. And I'd adjust my stop to at least a 2-1. Take a look at XLF. XLF hit a new all-time high, pulling back. Kind of feels a little bear flaggy there. Let's take a look at the 4-hour. We've only got 2 hits so far, but we'll start a channel. And we'll see where we go from here. Okay. So banks and financials coming back up from the bottom here. See if we can get a nice big push up, maybe hit a new all-time high. JP Morgan. I was looking for the bounce or the push below there, the bounce at this price, and then the rejection by this gap, and then the push down. Instead, We got the support at that gap, the push up. Looking at this right now, I can see that it's trying to break out. So I selected these points here for a reason, because they're higher and they're back here. And now we see price trying to, like, it keeps wicking above. Like it's trying to break out, gets a pullback, tries to break out again, gets a pullback. Now we're hitting lower lows and lower highs. And now we're kind of like channeling down here as we can't break out and push to a higher high. So, I mean, this is showing me weakness. Like it's it's 4 times it's tried to break out of that and it didn't break out. So I'd be questioning JP Morgan. And then, of course, you got to take a look at Bank of America. And we'll take a look at the weekly. I haven't quite hit that liquidity area yet, but I think it wants it. Break to the upside of the channel, the retest, the big wick down in and the buy up with the volume, the push back into this high here. And I think it's going to want to try and go. And I think Bank of America, based on this chart, is going to be what carries the rest, or it's going to push. And it's going to push Morgan and everybody else off of basically Goldman's numbers. I think it's going to target this volume imbalance up here from the monthly. And that could be a really nice swing, especially if, if I'm looking at like a smaller portfolio. Bank of America's got some decent low priced premiums. So that might be a nice swing that someone might want to look at. Obviously, adjust your stop. Don't go too heavy. Never go too heavy. No, never go full port unless you're here to gamble. Then do what you will. Taking a look at some other semiconductors. Intel got the breakup, the pull down, the range, the push down. This thing looks like it just wants blood, which is really sad because uh, I thought Intel would be a sleeping giant, and right now it is not. It looks like it's just bleeding out. It's probably going to try and head for these lows. So one could maybe get some like 27, 28 puts with some time and then just kind of ride this down or wait for a push back up into like 35 and then maybe grab some puts. Either way, if you grab enough time, it's not really going to matter. Cisco also breaking to the downside of this trend line after breaking to the downside of this. These all look weak to me, unfortunately. Let's take a look at the rest of semiconductors. Marvel chopping along, wants to break to the downside, feeling weak as well on the weekly there. Uh, Skyworks just had their earnings, big push down. That was a big gap down on good earnings too. Well, I mean not great, but they beat. MU I think might be pushing up to the top side of this channel, and then coming back down. I think we might get a bear flag on MU, which I also really like MU. Uh, ARM broke to the downside of this trend, is now retesting it. I think this might be a decent area for a short. I would play a pretty quiet or pretty tight stop on this, and I'd target at least these lows and then the bottom of this gap for a gap fill. That might be a nice one on there. TSM ranging up here. Nothing really to report there, in my opinion. AMD feeling weak and a big push down. Qualcomm has decided that they want to go ahead and push up. So that's a nice move for them. One other one I do want to take a look at here is Oracle. Finding some support at this gap fill. Interestingly enough, we'll see if it wants to make a run up. Oracle, if you didn't know, also holds the data for TikTok. So if they're going to ban TikTok, um, that might be issues for them. SMCI, I'm just assume is going to go down. It's been bleeding out pretty hard after that. I think we're going to push down into 600 and then we might try to rip up. But this chart is feeling bearish, in my opinion. And then, I mean, VRT, I don't know why you want me to look at VRT, Norbert. You just keep posting the same weekly chart in the chat. It just keeps going up. I would look for a break over these highs and a push up for a 2-to-1 trade. That's about what I would do. It got the break out of this range, break to the downside, break to the upside, testing, now pushing back up. I feel like that might want to try 100 at least this week on a break of that, maybe 105. But I mean, you're in price discovery territory up here. With VRT looking like it might want to make a move to the upside there. And RVMD, Revolution Medicines, sure. I mean, the one thing I'm noticing is we're hitting all-time highs here on almost no volume comparative to the rest of the move. I'm sorry, not all-time highs. I don't know what they do. They might have something in the works, but I mean, this is getting a big move up. Had the flag, got the breakout to the flag, pushing up into earnings. I mean, honestly, I would look for puts on earnings, but whenever something's running up like this ahead of earnings, especially when like the last one was red, how bad was it? 33% miss on earnings after an 11% beat on revenue. That 100% miss on that can't be right. That's got to be a typo. 2%, 11% miss on earnings, 144% hit on revenue. So I mean, they're kind of all over the place. So either somebody knows something and they're running it up because they've got news coming out, or they're going to hit earnings and do what they always do and then dump. So that's what I would feel. I'm kind of a bear when it comes to stuff like that. I would feel like I'd be looking to the downside. Any other sectors? EV sector. I mean, these are all just trash at this point. I'm not going to look at that. One other one that I did want to check out was cybersecurity. D Dog tried to get the breakout there, couldn't make it. Net got the big gap down on their earnings after a beat on both of them. I think there was some issues about pricing. I think I don't remember exactly. OKTA might be looking for a short there if net is pushing down as much as it did. FTNT also pushing down. Uh, CrowdStrike holding their own still, not quite breaking out yet. ANET break to the downside of that triangle. Now it's getting a push back up. Not really looking at a trade there. Checkpoint also the push down. Like a lot of these companies are starting to pull back. That's slightly concerning for anybody who's long into these. This one just got the gap fill and is trying to push back up. And RPD feeling pretty bearish on Rapid 7. But what about weed stocks, ACB? I mean, sure, they got the rip on federal news. Uh, but in my opinion, like, so here's the thing about the weed stocks. I get it. They get moves on news like that, but when it comes down to it, they're so heavily taxed they can't make a profit. So, sure, uh, the federal government may be reclassifying marijuana. Uh, it, it's, it's not going to change the fact that they're not a profitable business structure. So I would short them, in my opinion, and I did. So take that for what you will. I'm bearish on AMD. They've got a long-term trend line there that they're not able to get out of. Snow, I was looking for the bounce back up into this gap. Didn't quite get it. Getting the push down. I still think it wants to target this low here and get in around 138, 139. So this is where I would look to take a long, actually. So that's what I'm looking at on snow. IoT chart wise, I mean, they just took out all these stops, haven't quite filled this gap yet, but they did take out the stops here from January. So you look at the weekly. Nice break here as well with the volume imbalance and trend line. So you look at the 4 hour now. I mean, that's the trend line I'd be watching for a breakout or a rejection. Now, if we're gonna like get there around like 1 in the afternoon, I'd be looking for a drop. An ACB. I mean, yeah, I don't think the weed companies. I mean, look at this overall. Come on now. All the hype in the world isn't going to, in my opinion, get this thing back to profitable. So I would look to grab some puts with time. That's my opinion though. What is HubSpot? I don't know what ticker symbol that is. Nerf. I don't know what ticker symbol that is either. Let's take a look at the earnings that we have coming up. I don't think we got that hub. I think you've showed me this before, haven't you? I think somebody showed this to me. What does this company do? Financials overview. Investment and superannuation portfolio. What is that? Is that even a word? I don't even know what that word that is. Operates platform. I mean, this basically looks like a middleman company. They're worth $3 billion though, so I can't really complain about that. Annual revenue keeps going up. Earnings forecasted keeps going up. They didn't beat earnings last quarter. So annually, they do 2022 and 2023. All right, so what do we got? Like, we don't even have earnings coming up right now. The pullback on that miss, not even a pullback. Like it pulled back and then just ran higher. I mean, according to this, they just had earnings in late February. Oh, Hubs. Chart wise, I'd be looking for possible longs here. It's held this area. Nice support area right here. The wicks wicking in, and the break above, the retest. After hitting a higher high. Obviously, they're in excuse me, a downtrend on the daily here. There, I couldn't get even far away from it, so I'd maybe look for a bounce there and push back up. Yep. Pan W, sideways. Nothing to report on Pan W. No volume increases, no breakouts. It's just sitting. Just sitting. Costco is doing what I thought it would do. And after it got the breakout here, completed this trade, it's basically looking for it to move sideways. And now it's ranging. So, traded up to maybe 766. I then look for a pullback into 700 again. That's what I'd be looking for Costco. Oops. Wow. Netflix gap down. Looks like it might want to push into 600 here. What is that? What is that ridiculous line right there? What is that? Come on, Joe. Okay. So that one that makes more sense. Breakdown range at the top of this range now. So here's where the range hit. So we got the big push down. There's the bottom, and then it came back up, and this is where it turned around. So here's the range. Now we're back at the top of the range. I would look to trade puts to the bottom of the range. That's what I would do. I would range trade this. And Starbucks. I dislike Starbucks. I assume they're going to continue down. That is both both a personal opinion and my best case scenario opinion, I guess. I dislike the company, and I don't think they're going to do very well right now. Especially, I mean, this. Listen, listen. If I really want to pay, what is it? Probably $6 for black drip coffee. Fine. I don't. I don't. Nobody wants to pay those prices, and I think people are getting sick of paying the prices that these companies are charging. You got your McDonald's, your Starbucks, and I mean, people are starting to realize their prices have all gone up. Their food and drink quality have not. And like, I mean, I can go to Chick-fil-A and get a better chicken sandwich than I can get at McDonald's, and I can go spend more on a McChicken. Like, what are they doing, man? I don't get what they're doing. Other than the fact that like they want to try and compete with these larger companies. But I mean, if at this point, like if I wanted to knock off Chick-fil-A sandwich, I'd go to McDonald's and I get a McChicken because it was like a third of the price. But now that it's roughly the same price in my area, I'm just gonna go to Chick-fil-A and get the much better tasting chicken. Like, why would I go to McDonald's and sit in line for 17 minutes to get a crappy burger? It's just what am I watching this week? Oh, VRTX Pharmaceuticals Incorporated. They've got earnings. They're ranged here after this big push up, bouncing at this gap in this order. I think they might want to make a move up. So if that is your cup of tea, I'd look at VRTX. I'm also looking at Plantair, looking for the run up into earnings on that one. Let's see, what else have I seen coming through? BNTX also has earnings. I would short BNTX, them, and I think Moderna also. I mean, they had a good earnings, but BNTX is a different company. And yeah, I think they're going to go down the flusher. Let's take a look at Tuesday's earnings. Disney also watching. So watching for that to the upside of that range. Uber, yes, also. It's been interesting to watch this company and Lyft and how they compare. One of these things is not like the other. They both operate in the same space, but one of these things is not like the other. So now we have to decide, is Lyft undervalued or is Uber overvalued? And I think Uber is valued properly. And I think Lyft is going to die off. I could be wrong. But Uber has way more contracts with way more places. And I mean, I can log into Uber and I can have a package shipped through Uber, right? Come on now. I think they might run into issues with pay, but I think they'll also be able to take on those issues and figure something out. So, Uber, I'd be looking to long here. D Dog, also an eye on that. I like this stock. It's fun to trade. Volume's going up, earnings is coming up. It tried to break out. I'd look for it to break out here. I'd keep an eye uh, over 130, 131, that area after this pullback. Only load up within your risk. Never go full port. Just always gonna say that. Spy. I think Spy wants 516 this week. I think the other QQQ's also on up. Oxy has earnings this week. Oil has not been doing super well. Let's take a look at oil. Right. So oil has tried to get the breakout and now it's getting the pullback in. Is hello? It's coming back to the bottom of the gap. So we could be getting a classic break to the upside, break to the downside, and then continuation. So keeping an eye on oil. There's been some OPEC issues. That's going to affect profitability going forward for Oxy and other companies too. It did try to get the break out of this range here, the range being here to here. And now I think it might want to come back down. So I'd be, possibly looking at puts going into Oxy's earnings. Mm, that's about all I'm looking at there. CPNG has been an interesting options flow trader. There tends to be people who know, look at this big move up, one earnings heading into this earnings right now. This will be something I'll be watching flow on to see if I can catch someone who might know something. So looking at CPNG, keeping an eye on that one. See what else we got on Wednesday. Anything in particular? Uber, ARM. Definitely be watching ARM on Wednesday. Looking for that break and continuation to the downside. And if it happens before Wednesday, if this comes down to 85 before Wednesday, then I'd look for continuation gap fill and then probably some news coming out of their earnings. The thing about ARM is I really like their financials. I really like their profit margins. They're ridiculously profitable. So this big move down is interesting to me. And then Disney. Uh, See, we keep holding this price target here, this pink dashed line. We haven't made a significant move below it. Now we're getting moved back up and trying to push up. So I think you might want to try the upside of the range around 120 this week. Mm, Nothing really else on the earnings calendar for Wednesday. Nothing catches my eye for Thursday at the moment either, and I'm assuming Friday is Enbridge on Friday. And that one trying to get a break out there. Didn't quite do it. Interesting. So I'll be watching flow for Enbridge as well and see if there's anything else I can catch. Anything else I want to take a look at? Not really. I know PFE has had some really bullish flow coming out here, and it's at a pretty big spot for some support down around this area. So this might be one that I might take a stab at some more longs on, longs off, and maybe try and target that 35 with some time. And when I say with time, I'm looking like at least 30, like bare bones 30 days, preferably around 60 days of time on a move like that. This is a weekly chart. So if I'm looking at a move on a weekly chart, I'm looking for at least 30 days, if not more. Should be looking for more around 60. And if the premium doesn't match with the risk, then I just don't take the trade. It's fine. I don't need to put myself in a position where, I'd be risking more than I really want to on a trade just because I think the setup might be better. Some people do that, some people don't. I do not. I don't like trading like that. So be looking for longs here into 35, 36, and we'll see if we can get a lower high and then a roll back over to the downside. But hard to believe that Pfizer was an $11 stock in 2009. and it ran all the way up. So keep an eye on that. Might be something to just grab some longs on and hold on to it, maybe even some shares. All right, so the recording will be up for this probably tomorrow afternoon after after I do my trading. And yeah, you can always look back at it, see what my thoughts are going into these things. If there are no other questions, I hope you all have a good night. Is it raining again? Man, I hope it's not raining again. There's way too much rain here. I think it's raining again. All right. With that, then, have a good night, and I will see you in the Discord. Good night.